David, what are you doing home? My wife of 28 years, Rebecca, asked as she stepped through the garage door. She saw me sitting at the kitchen table, less than 10 feet away. Her presence partially blocked the view of a younger man following her into the house. As always, Rebecca looked stunning, tall at 5'9", with a healthy 145-pound frame. Her auburn hair fell just over her shoulders, and she was dressed professionally for work. Today, she wore a white blouse with an extra button undone, revealing a hint of cleavage that was hard to ignore. Her black linen skirt accentuated her world-class legs, and her 3-inch heels perfectly filled out the back of her skirt. I briefly considered her question, which felt somewhat ridiculous, and responded with equal sarcasm. I live here. The irritation that had been bubbling up over the past few weeks showed when she shot back, "Of course you live here. What I want to know is why you're home at 3:30 in the afternoon." I often tell people that I've loved Rebecca since the moment we met. I had an appointment with 4 top executives at her company, where Rebecca worked as an administrative assistant. She met me in the lobby and escorted me to the senior suite of offices for my meetings. Hours later, when she walked me back to the lobby, I took a chance and asked her out for dinner. The rest, as they say, is history. By now, Rebecca's companion had stepped around her and stood by her side. I half expected him to smirk, but instead, his intelligent eyes showed signs of concern. Things weren't going as planned. I could ask you the same question, Angie. What are you doing home an hour and a half early? Rebecca and I have been inseparable since our first date. I'm proud to say that I've devoted every ounce of energy to her and our family. I worked hard to build a small but successful insurance brokerage firm with the support of her employer. Rebecca also went to college, earning a bachelor's degree in 6 years. Rebecca had climbed the ranks from a support role to heading human resources in the company's Hartford, Connecticut office. I had loved her unconditionally for almost 3 decades, but as I sat there, I couldn't help but see the monster she had become over the past few weeks. I forced myself to stay calm, even though every part of me wanted to break her as effectively as she broke me when I found out she was lying and cheating. When I gave Angie my usual crooked grin, she responded, "We came home early to talk with you." "We?" I asked, looking directly into Angie's eyes as the man beside her took the opportunity to introduce himself. He stepped forward, extended his hand, and confidently said, "Mr. Whitman, David, I'm Joshua Tanner. I'm the new attorney at Kellerman & Sons, and I've been working closely with Rebecca for the last couple of months." Ignoring his outstretched hand, I continued to stare Angie down, suppressing the primal urge to leap up and wrap my hands around his neck. Instead, I growled, "I know exactly who and what you are." For the first time, I saw a flicker of concern in my wife's eyes, and she cringed when I added, "You threatened to cut the balls off the last person who disrespected you, so why are you letting this pile of garbage get away with it in your own home?" Angie looked worried and confused. She's always been a careful planner, and I was certain she and her boy toy had prepared for every possible scenario. In her mind, I was already a compliant fool. A quick glance at him made me smile. His tension was palpable, and I could tell he was as uncomfortable as I was angry. A showdown was coming, and it was going to be nothing like what they had planned. I took a few deep breaths, trying to push the anger and disgust into a quiet corner of my heart. Let's get on with this, I thought. Time to throw them off balance. "Why don't I make us some drinks?" I offered. "We can talk in the living room." "A glass of wine, please," Angie requested quietly. When I turned to her companion, he seemed wary but said, "Rebecca tells me you enjoy bourbon and craft beer." I nodded. "I do." Then I got up from the kitchen table and headed to the bar in the family room. As I left, I heard urgent whispering behind me as they moved to the living room. A few minutes later, I joined them in the living room, where they were seated together on the sofa. I handed Angie a glass of her favorite merlot and gave him a tulip glass full of amber ale. I took my 2 fingers of bourbon and sat in the armchair across from them. After raising my glass in a mock salute, I took a small sip of the burning liquid. He returned the toast and took a sip of his beer, studying the color and carbonation before commenting, "This is one of the most complex amber ales I've ever had." "What is it?" "Pepsi Blue Ribbon," I answered, watching as his eyes flared with anger. Angie looked confused and then blurted out, "You've always said PBR is worse than donkey urine and the crappiest beer ever made." She was halfway through her comment when she noticed me laughing. She exploded, "You're such an ass. We came home to have a calm talk with you, and you've been nothing but rude and condescending." I just smiled and questioned, "I'm rude and condescending? I suppose this is the moment where I get a lesson in polite, uplifting conversation from my ever-faithful wife." Angie cringed, avoiding eye contact, and her companion tried to take over. "David, we've come here to discuss." I cut him off. "You had it right the first time." "Excuse me." He looked confused, as people like him often do. "When you first addressed me, you called me Mr. Whitman before presumptuously switching to David." "I prefer—" "No, I insist. You call me Mr. Whitman," I said, watching his face turn red. I added with a shrug, "Or sir." Before he could continue, I turned to Angie and demanded, "What do you want to talk about?" When he looked like he was going to respond, I shut him down. "I'm talking to my wife. Just sit there, drink your complex amber donkey piss, and keep quiet." Angie was furious and snapped, "Your behavior this afternoon has been disgusting." I wanted to stop now. I nodded, pretending to consider her request. "Do you think my behavior today is better or worse than yours over the last 5 or 6 weeks?" "What are you talking about?" Angie looked both confused and worried. Her companion seemed to be holding his breath, sensing their plan was falling apart. Looking Angie dead in the eyes, I told her, "I'm not sure what angers me more, that you let him put his worthless little hands on you, or that you treat me like an imbecile." The stunned look on Rebecca's face was priceless. Her eyes narrowed, and in a hushed voice, she asked the obvious, "You know, it seems I have more friends at your office than you do," I said. 2 weeks ago, I received an anonymous email from someone at Kellerman's. It warned me about your affair and included 3 attachments. The pictures showed you at Middle Woods Park, enjoying a picnic, holding hands, and kissing. "I'm sorry you had to find out that way," Rebecca said, clearly trying to figure out how to proceed. I didn't let her. "So, you want a divorce?" "No," she quickly responded, sliding to the edge of the couch, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "I love you and don't want a divorce. What Michael and I have is just a short-term fling. He's new to Connecticut and hasn't made many friends. Once he's settled, I'm sure he'll find a regular girlfriend." I shook my head. "Sorry, but that doesn't work for me. I signed up for a monogamous relationship with a loving wife, but instead, I discovered the woman I've devoted my life to is nothing but a cheater. A divorce fits my future plans much better." "David, please stop," Rebecca begged. "I don't want a divorce, and I don't think you do either. This was just a one-time fling and nothing more. I was attracted to Michael and wanted a bit of excitement in my life. It's never happened before, and it will be over soon. It won't happen again, I promise." I took a small sip of my bourbon and let the silence hang for a moment before responding. "First, your promises mean nothing. Everyone in this room knows you're a liar." Rebecca was about to explode, but I cut her off. "And second, why should I believe this is your first affair? For all I know, it's your 51st. Please, you need to stop and think," she pleaded. "We've built a life together, and now that Emma's married and thinking about starting her own family, we can slow down and plan for a wonderful retirement in a few years. My fling with Michael will be long over and forgotten. I stood up, not bothering to ask if they wanted another drink, and walked to the den to refill my glass. I was sure my poor manners weren't lost on the two idiots in the living room. When I returned, they were huddled together, whispering. "May I say a few things, Mr. Whitman?" the man asked. "The floor is yours," I replied, dripping with disdain. He paused to gather his thoughts. "Rebecca is right. Our relationship is just a short-term fling. I regret leading a married woman into an affair. I've never done that before, but we hit it off. As you know, she's a spectacular woman. Your threat of divorce, while understandable in the heat of the moment, would be unwise in the long term. You've invested decades together. Don't throw it away." Rebecca was initially concerned that the prenuptial agreement her father made you both sign would cause her to lose many of her assets in a divorce if we were caught. But as a lawyer, I can assure you that a nearly 30-year-old agreement can be easily overturned. Laws change, legal wording becomes outdated, and any competent attorney could have that document thrown out. Even more important, you need ironclad proof of infidelity. Other than some mild, innocent public flirting that some of our associates may have seen, I'm confident you don't have the evidence necessary to enforce the agreement. As he finished his brilliant legal summation, I couldn't help but wonder how my wife had become so foolish. Turning to Rebecca, I asked, "Why would you take legal advice from a corporate attorney who graduated in the bottom quarter of his class from Texas Southern University Law School?" Texas Southern is consistently ranked as one of the worst law schools in the country. Year in and year out, the man started to stammer. "How did you know?" I cut him off. One of my mottos is know the enemy. I then turned my attention back to Rebecca. "So, what's your plan moving forward, Angie?" She took a moment to gather her thoughts before saying, "Michael and I are going to spend the weekend together. I'll be staying at his apartment tonight, and tomorrow we're leaving for New York City. We'll stay there tomorrow and Saturday night, and I'll be home on Sunday." Even though I already knew their plans, hearing it from her felt like a punch to the gut. I hoped she saw the sadness in my eyes as I asked, "So, not only have you shared your body with this piece of garbage, but you're also going to share our quarterly getaway weekend with him. We've gone to New York City 4 times a year, every year since we've been married. You've just shattered all those memories. Every Broadway play, every concert, every sporting event. I don't know what's happened to you, Angie, but you've become as much of a mess as he is." I nodded toward her companion. Rebecca could see how devastated I was and tried to respond, but I didn't hear a word. The voices in my head were screaming, "End it. End it now." Looking over at her companion, I asked, "Is your wife okay with this?" "David, stop," Rebecca interrupted. "Michael is a widower. His wife died several years ago. He would never cheat on her." Even he seemed uncomfortable with her defense, cringing at her words. I smirked and replied, "Unlike you." Then, turning back to him, I asked, "Is that true? Are you widowed?" He hesitated, looking between Angie and me before saying, "Yes." I reached down and pulled a manila folder from my backpack, which was sitting beside my chair. I opened it, scanned the first page, and read aloud, "Dr. Natalie Tanner, Emergency Department Surgeon, Ascension Street, Johns Hospital, and Detroit. Husband, Michael. Daughters, Katie, 11, and Lacey, 9. Dr. Browner has resigned from her position effective June 22nd and will be moving to Hartford, Connecticut, to join her husband as soon as their children finish school. She will be taking a similar position at St. Francis Hospital and Medical Center in Hartford. If I wasn't so heartbroken over my marriage, I might have laughed at the look on Rebecca's face. "You lied to me?" she asked, shocked. I couldn't help but laugh. "Can you imagine?" I bellowed. "A cheater and a liar lies to a cheater and a liar. What's this world coming to?" Michael reached out and took Rebecca's hand, but before I could shout, "Get your hands off my wife," I realized something. I just didn't care anymore. Baby, I'm sorry. I did lie. I couldn't help it. You were so sexy and beautiful, and I wanted you. I needed you, so I lied to have you. He stood up, still holding her hand. "Let's go back to my place and talk. We'll go to New York tomorrow and have a great weekend. When we get back, we'll still have 3 weeks before my family arrives. After that, you can be a full-time wife, and I'll be a full-time husband and father." Rebecca considered her options for a moment before standing up. She took his hand and turned toward me. "After this weekend, I promise to give up Michael completely. I'll come home on Sunday and be the same loving wife I've always been." Angie and I stared at each other for a while, and I wondered if she could hear my already shattered heart breaking even more. I'd sat there, somewhat politely, while they told me about their fling and assured me it wouldn't affect my relationship with Angie in the long term. Now, I wanted my turn. "I'd like to ask that you both sit down and give me 30 minutes to lay out the changes I see happening," I said. They exchanged glances, silently debating. I pushed the issue, saying, "The least you can do is give me 30 minutes of your time." Reluctantly, they sat down. I set up several Zoom meetings for us. I told them, pointing the remote at the TV and pressing a few buttons. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I'd become quite the expert at arranging Zoom meetings. When the TV screen lit up, I said, "Peter, Lou, can you hear me?" "We can, David," Peter answered. "Angie, you know our family attorney, Peter," I continued. "I'd like to introduce you to his partner and my new divorce attorney, Lou. Gentlemen, this is corporate attorney extraordinaire Joshua Tanner." Angie and her lover were stunned as I finished. "Gentlemen, you have the floor." Lou wasted no time. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm representing your husband in your upcoming divorce. Papers were filed with the court earlier this afternoon. I'd greatly appreciate it if you would retain an attorney and make arrangements to be officially served. I'll give you until the end of the day on Monday. If I haven't heard from your attorney, we will hire a process server." "We have filed for divorce on the grounds of infidelity," Lou continued. "We have a private investigator's report that includes detailed audio, visual and telecommunication evidence of your affair with Mr. Tanner." As Lou wrapped up, I tossed a second manila folder onto the coffee table in front of Angie. The loud slap made them both jump. "It's a copy of our divorce petition, including the PI report," I told the stunned pair. While Michael reached for the folder, Angie looked back at the screen. "We will be insisting that the prenuptial agreement is fully enforced," Lou continued. "You're aware that every 2 years, all of your family's business and personal legal matters are reviewed. As part of that review, the prenuptial agreement has been revised to stay within current state legal guidelines. We have your signed and notarized signature for every update over the past 28 years. I'm 100% confident that the prenuptial agreement is fully enforceable." Lou paused before delivering the final blow. "As of last night's vote by the board of directors at Whitman Brokerage, you are relieved of all corporate responsibilities and no longer associated with Mr. Whitman's firm in any way. You have 7 days to return your company car. Your company credit cards have been paid off and cancelled. Your cell phone will be cancelled in 7 days. Your memberships to Cedar Mountain Country Club and LA Fitness have also been cancelled. We've also paid off and cancelled the 3 joint credit cards you shared with my client. Your joint savings, checking, and retirement funds have been frozen. Per the prenuptial agreement, we expect an 80-20 split of cash and near-cash assets in Mr. Whitman's favor. Mr. Whitman will retain the house free and clear. We've requested the court expedite your eviction as you have another residence you've shared with Mr. Tanner. We will argue that it's easier for you to move. We are asking the court to grant Mr. Whitman full possession of the property immediately and give you 30 days to remove your personal belongings from the house. there will be no alimony, and child support is irrelevant. There are also several smaller claims my client has made, which your attorney can explain to you. David, did I miss anything? You've covered all the highlights, Lou. Thanks, I replied. The TV screen went black as the call ended. Angie jumped to her feet, screaming, "Wait!" She turned to me and demanded, "Get them back. I have questions." I laughed. "That's not how it works, Angie. You'll need to hire your own lawyer for answers." "You," Angie growled. "I'm going to destroy you." With a smirk, I looked at her partner in crime and asked, "Hey, genius, what's your legal mind's take on the odds of her destroying me in this divorce?" His silence made Angie sink back into the couch, curling in on herself. I couldn't help but smile ear to ear. I held up the TV remote, waved it at her, and pointed it at the screen as the second Zoom meeting began. "Jake, can you hear me?" I asked. "Hi, David," Jake replied. "I've got a conference call coming up, so I'll make this quick. Browner, you're fired effective immediately. Your personal items are being removed from your office and will be placed in a box in the lobby. If they're not claimed within 24 hours, they'll be thrown out. You won't be receiving a recommendation." Rebecca's boss chimed in next. "Rebecca, I can't tell you how disappointed I am. Your behavior as a senior member of my staff is inexcusable. That said, 29 years of exemplary service must be taken into account. Your position in Hartford has been eliminated, but I'm offering you the same position at our Albany, New York facility. You have a week to decide if you'll take the transfer and 30 days to move to Albany." The screen went blank again. Angie cried into her hands, while Browner slouched back into the couch. I was purposely smirking at Browner when he noticed me, and I saw the rage building in his eyes. He was younger, bigger, and likely stronger, but unfortunately for him, just as stupid as a bag of rocks. He looked ready to explode. I waved the remote again, pointed it at the TV, and pressed a button. The screen lit up, and I asked, "Dr. Browner, can you hear me?" Angie and her lover sat in stunned silence, pale as ghosts with their mouths hanging open. The face of a beautiful blonde filled the screen. "I've asked you to call me Cynthia," she corrected. "Sorry, Cynthia," I replied. "The floor is yours." Michael's wife didn't waste time. "Michael, I've filed for divorce. Expect to be served in the next few days. The kids and I will stay in Michigan, and I've been able to keep my position at the hospital." "Please, Cynthia," Michael begged. "We can work this out. It was just a fling." Cynthia's expression turned to disgust. "I've been doing some checking since David contacted me. This is the third job you've lost because you couldn't keep it in your pants. After I received the private investigator's report, I asked him to dig deeper." Everyone's attention was glued to the screen as Cynthia continued. "Mrs. Whitman, do you know Alice Packer, Joy Likely, or Tori Jones? How about Candy Phillips?" When Angie didn't respond, Cynthia laughed. "I don't expect an answer. The question was rhetorical. I know they're all associates of yours. Did you know Michael had flings with each of them? You were just one of his many affairs. Tell me where to send your belongings, Michael. You're not welcome at my house." As the screen faded to black, Michael yelled, "I'm going to kill you." He struggled to his feet, but I calmly slipped my .45 from between the chair cushions and pointed it at him. His face turned ashen, just the reaction I wanted. "You've got two choices, Michael," I said. "You can leave, or you can sit down and shut up. I don't care what you do, but if you come at me, I'll shoot your left ball off." I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed when he sat back down, but I was glad I could proceed with my final Zoom meeting. I glanced over at Angie. She looked pale, her cheeks streaked with tears and mascara smudged around her eyes. She looked awful. "I've been seeing a counselor for the last 2 weeks," I said. Angie groaned, burying her face in her hands. "It's kind of funny," I continued. "You cheat, lie, and share yourself with this scumbag, and I'm the one who needs a mental health expert. How messed up is that? I laughed bitterly. A few moments later, I told Rebecca. After I told Dr. Reynolds our story, she asked me a question that really helped me. She asked if I understood the old saying, "Love is blind." It was like a light turning on in a dark room. I loved you so much that I never would have known you were cheating if not for that anonymous email. My love was so strong that it overlooked all your flaws. Hell, in my eyes, you didn't have any. I hope you realize you'll never find anyone who will love you as much as I did. Angie continued to cry, rocking back and forth on the couch. I'm going to keep seeing Dr. Reynolds, I said. I think it's important to have someone to trust with your innermost thoughts and feelings, especially after something this devastating. I never imagined someone I love so much could humiliate and disrespect me to this extent. But the good news is I'll get over the hurt and humiliation, just like I'll get over you. I told Dr. Reynolds about my plan for today. She's not a big fan of revenge but agreed that the first 3 Zoom meetings were justified. She thought you deserved some payback. However, she did try to talk me out of this next Zoom meeting, warning it might set back my personal recovery. I thought about it and realized she's probably right. It will hurt me, but I don't care. This next meeting will hurt both of us. I held up the remote one last time and waved it at Angie, who shrunk back into the couch in panic. I pointed it at the TV and pressed the button. All eyes were glued to the screen. When the face appeared, Angie groaned. "Oh no, please God, no." "I love you, Daddy," said my daughter Emma. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied. Angie shrieked. "Why? How could you possibly be this awful to me?" Emma's voice was calm but firm. "I heard it all, Mom. I've heard every word you and your boyfriend have said over the last hour. I know what you've done and what you plan to do. You disgust me. Sweetheart, please," Angie pleaded. "This is a complicated situation. You're too young to understand." Emma's response was sharp. "Mom, I'm 26 years old, a happily married woman. Your situation isn't complicated. It's grotesque and pitiful. I don't know what's changed, but you've become selfish and totally self-absorbed." Angie was breathing heavily as she begged. "Emma, baby, I've been so lonely since you moved away. It's like I've been living in a fog. I missed you so much." Emma looked perplexed. "So what you're saying, Mom, is that it's my fault you become a liar and a cheat, crushed Dad, and are now getting divorced?" "No, that's not what I'm saying, and you know it," Angie stammered. "It doesn't matter, Mom," Emma said coldly. "I think we'd all need a break from you. I'll come to Boston this weekend, and we can talk," Rebecca shouted. "I'm so sorry this happened. I need to be with my baby girl." "That's not going to work, Mom, for 2 reasons," Emma replied. "First, you'll be in New York with your worthless, unemployed, soon-to-be ex-boyfriend." "I'm not going to New York," Rebecca insisted. "And second," Emma continued, "Scott and I have planned a small, private celebration for our closest family and friends. We've rented Avenue near Cape Cod." "Baby, what are you celebrating?" Angie asked, her voice trembling. "Since you weren't invited, I'll tell you," Emma said, her voice steady. "I'm 3 months pregnant, and we're having a baby girl in February. Emma, I'm your mother, and I insist you invite me," Angie demanded. "That's not going to happen, Mom," Emma replied firmly. "I want my special party to be filled with love and happiness, not the lying, cheating, and disrespect that's consuming your life right now. Goodbye, Mom." For the 4th time, the screen went blank as Angie sat there, crying. I got to my feet and tucked my pistol into the back of my pants. "I'm going out for dinner and will be back in 2 hours," I said. Looking at Rebecca, I added, "Please pack your clothes and essentials. You won't be allowed back into the house until the court responds to my divorce petition, which should take about a week." Turning to Michael, I said, "You've seen what I'm capable of. I'm giving you 3 days to move out of the state. If you're still here on Monday, I'll make sure you're crippled in a much more literal sense. As I opened the front door, I looked back at the utterly defeated pair and said, "Enjoy your weekend in New York. It's supposed to be beautiful both days."